being from Mumbai, how do you kind of see yourself relative to other people from India?
It is literally the city that never sleeps. I think, our hustle is pretty much unmatched. Movies and cricket basically are the two religions in India.
It's almost like an LA New York hybrid in a way.
Essentially, like being a Mumbaikar means that you are kind of, your spirit is very tough and you are just very focused on work and, you know how to hustle. I think this idea of like coexisting also is a very Mumbai thing, which is really beautiful to see.
Today we're going to be talking about India and different regions of India, specifically focusing on the city of Mumbai. We're going to talk about the culture, the people that live there, and some aspects of the industry. You may have heard of a little thing called Bollywood. So today I'm joined by Yashna Malhotra. Yashna, could you tell the good people out there a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure. And my name is Yashna Malhotra. I'm a screenwriter based out of Mumbai. We actually met when we were studying at UCLA in LA, and that's where I got my MFA in screenwriting. And I've been working in India as a writer since. Before that, in my previous life, I got a master's from Northwestern in integrated marketing communications and worked in the advertising and marketing space for a bit before I pivoted to screenwriting full time. And yeah, I'm currently working on a couple of projects, all of which are in different stages of development, and very excited to be on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for coming. Now, I want to talk about the city of Mumbai. It's in India, which is obviously a big country. Certainly, I'm sure everyone's heard of India, but how often would you say people know what Mumbai is when you say, I'm from Mumbai? Do people say kind of what's that, or does it depend? Some people, like, they may have heard of it, but they don't really know much about the city, or do you find people are often quite knowledgeable about the city?
Yeah, I think people are quite knowledgeable about the city. They always ask me, is it Mumbai or is it Bombay? And you could say both. Mumbai was the official name that came in much later. And so when I grew up, it was Bombay. So everyone kind of my age here still refers to it as Bombay. Yeah, mostly I've come across people, they immediately know what Bombay is, but they don't quite, I mean, a lot of people also don't quite know how modern Bombay is. So they ask me, are there cows on the road and are there, camels on the street? And I was like, in Bombay? No, it's just like any other city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's start with, for those of us who maybe, and this would be the case for me, like I've heard of the city, I know where it's located, I know it's a major economic powerhouse in India, but let's start with, first of all, kind of like where is it in India?
Yeah, it's on the coast, on the western coast of India, and it's made up of 7 islands. It's really beautiful. We've got the Arabian Sea. And so, yeah, it's very much on the western part of India.
The big industry there, right, that one thing someone might know is Bollywood's based there, right? So the biggest Indian film industry, and I understand there are multiple Indian film industries also, based on languages, but the big one, right, Bollywood, is based in Mumbai. If someone asked, like, Bollywood, it's filmmaking in India, was there anything you could, like, follow that up with? Like, here's the basic pitch of, like, here's what Bollywood is, like the language and all that.
Sure. Yeah, so Bollywood is the mainstream Hindi language industry. We also have a very large South Indian industry. It's a huge, huge industry. But Bollywood is the Hindi mainstream industry that we have, and it's known to be very glamorous. People are like, oh, but where's Bollywood? And it's not really a place in the city. It's more of it's the idea of the film industry here. We make a lot of movies. We're one of the biggest film industries in the world, certainly. We do a lot of business worldwide as well, especially in countries like China, Germany, other European countries as well. The US, our movies are popular everywhere. We traditionally had a lot of, and we still do, we continue to have a lot of song and dance, a lot of, our films are mostly musicals. That's how they are or have been kind of constructed or structured as. But also we do all genres of film and we do them really well. Our industry is huge. They're very star driven and director driven. And so, you know, movies and cricket basically are the two religions in India. And Bollywood certainly, you know, falls into that. Everyone all over the country really appreciates cinema. It's something you do together as a family. People really look forward to it. We have a lot of screens, you know, all over India. Um, and yeah, it's a huge part of people's lives. um, you know, even when people get married, there's always Bollywood music playing, again, because the song and dance of it is just so, you know, it's just such an important part of people's lives. um, you will feel, even though Bollywood isn't a physical space, you will feel Bollywood literally in every aspect of life. You walk into a store, they're going to be playing Bollywood music. You're going in a taxi or a rickshaw, there's Bollywood music playing. It's just ever present, there's no escaping it.
So that's really interesting about Bollywood. Would it be fair to say that if you were talking to someone from India and you said, I'm from Mumbai, that they would say, oh, so are you in movies or do you work in movies? Is it that sort of a brand in India the same way that stereotypically Los Angeles is in the US? You say, I'm from LA, and the follow up is, oh, are you involved in movies or TV?
Honestly, not so much because it is a very, you know, it's kind of seen as something that's hard to break into. And so the automatic assumption is not that you're in the movies, but you're always less than 6 degrees away from somebody who is in the movies. And so, you know, you'll know like either a celebrity or just somebody who works, you know, very closely in the industry. So you're always kind of a few degrees away from that. But no, surprisingly, that is not the automatic assumption. And I guess that's just because there's so many other industries in Bombay. And, you know, while we certainly have all of the production, international production companies and a lot of local ones here as well, there's every multinational company in the world is based out of Mumbai, you know, or like has a large office here.
So is it one of these things where it's not just the film and TV industry, but for a lot of sort of, you said multinational companies, they might use Mumbai as the city that they're going to operate in for India. They wouldn't base out of like Delhi, for example, or Hyderabad or any, I mean, unless it's maybe tech or something, other industries. But if the default is we're a big company, we're European or American or East Asian, and we want to get into India, the immediate thought is Mumbai is going to be our base.
Yeah, if you're entertainment, 100%, you know, you're going to be in India, and maybe if you want to go to the south as well, that's an option. But as far as I know, like the international ones are mostly based out of Mumbai. In terms of other industries, you're right. Like tech is primarily based out of Hyderabad or Bangalore. A lot of the multinationals that are in Mumbai are also in Delhi. So I guess it depends on like the regions that they're looking after. So you have like Delhi, which takes care of a different region, and Mumbai takes care of the west. But yeah, I mean, it's very common that if a company probably has just one or two offices, and if it's not completely tech based, that they will be operating out of Mumbai. So for example, like Google and Facebook, they have large campuses in, you know, Bangalore, Hyderabad, where they have the majority of their tech people, but like their marketing will only be based out of Mumbai, or you know their digital will only be based out of Mumbai, and so it's functions like that that are usually concentrated here. But having said that, again, our offices are pretty huge. Here there's an area in Mumbai called Bandra Kurla Complex, which basically it's just tall buildings everywhere, and you know it looks like you're in like Business Bay, Dubai, or like New York in a way. It's just, you know, very commercial buildings everywhere, and it's kind of like where a lot of buildings are, offices are located, but they're also located all over the city. And so yeah, it's another interesting thing about the city is that um, everyone kind of like you learn to coexist with different people and with different industries and just with different races and castes and socioeconomic classes. And so it's not that certain areas are like are going to be only you're going to find only like a very homogenous kind of people in one area. It's a whole range, and I think that's the beauty of the city, is that there's a place for you anywhere, and there's a place for everyone here, and it's truly a city based on like hustle, and hustle culture is huge, and it's kind of like if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. So it's like the New York of India in that sense.
Yeah, it sounds almost. I was following because it sounds like would finance also be a major industry in Mumbai as well? It's almost like an LA New York hybrid in a way. If you took the LA film stuff, the New York finance, you kind of put it together, and just generally it was like this is the big hub for the not the only big hub for the country, but like pretty close to like the number one major hub of commerce and art and.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Mumbai is the commercial and financial capital of the country. So yeah, most definitely, there's truth to what you're saying. And yeah, I mean, we have like the big four consulting companies out here. We have every, consumer products company, again, based in Mumbai. A lot of their marketing, and so many ad agencies. Advertising is huge. So many digital agencies. Yeah, there's like a lot that goes on in Mumbai. We're truly a very diverse powerhouse.
I'm curious to also get into the culture a little bit. So in terms of, I guess, being from Mumbai, how do you kind of see yourself relative to other people from India?
It's hard to define it that way, because obviously I come from a lot of privilege. I'm well educated, and I'm so like, yeah, you're definitely very aware of that in Bombay and also in India in general. But I think the sense of Bombay that's different from the rest of the city is that it is literally the city that never sleeps. I think our hustle is pretty much unmatched. Although I will say that the smaller, like the B cities, also have the youth that's there is just so ambitious and so focused on hustle, and they're like starting companies like that are doing really, really well. And so that is kind of translating and moving on to other cities as well, which is wonderful to see. But I think Mumbai is kind of like the original city. It's the city of dreams where, again, people from all over the country, kind of move here to find work and to make things work. And so I think that's really like the culture. We all kind of live and breathe that in a way. We don't know how to relax. We can't take things slow. Like it's always go, go, go. And so that's something that definitely all the city folks, would identify with. We work a lot, and we take a lot of pride in our work. And not to say in other parts of India that's not the case, but I think it's just that go, go, go hustle culture really defines Mumbai. And so I guess, yeah, I definitely, if I say I'm from Mumbai, that's kind of what I'm identifying with to some extent. And yeah, I think this idea of like coexisting also is a very Mumbai thing, which is really beautiful to see. Is that you have people from like different socioeconomic classes just living, in the same area. Like where I live, we live in an apartment building complex, but like right below where we live is a, slum area. And it's just the people, we coexist. Like we, say hi to each other, and we help each other out, and we're all like part of the same community. And like a couple of buildings down from me are like 3 different Bollywood celebrities have their apartments there. Like I even get their Wi-Fi, which is like pretty cool. But yeah, it's just beautiful how I think we're just a very tolerant city, more so than other parts of India, and that's something I'm also proud of about being from Mumbai. But essentially, like being a Mumbaikar means that you are kind of, your spirit is very tough, and you are just very focused on work, and you know how to hustle, and you don't know how to relax, I guess.
Yeah. Sounds like New Yorkers, pretty much. In just having grown up in New York, like that's
Yeah.
all of that. Almost all of that translates very, very closely to I would say New York, especially even more so than I think a lot of other American cities. With that stereotype of you tell someone you're from this
Absolutely.
city, and people are like, oh, that probably means these things. Interesting. I'm actually, when you mention all these different groups of
Yeah.
people, I'm curious to get into. I don't suppose I wouldn't say it as maybe ethnic groups, but I'm curious about language. So my understanding, right, with India, way more so than other comparatively big countries, the U.S., Brazil, China, Russia, where you kind of have a primary language, right? You got English in the U.S., Mandarin in China, Russian in Russia, Portuguese in Brazil, right? Spanish in Mexico. You've got a tremendous variety of languages in India. And while Hindi is like kind of sort of the main one, it's by far not the only language that is nationally recognized. Um, and my understanding is that Mumbai, it's in a province called Maharashtra, and Marathi is kind of the main language of that region of the country. So this is a question. I'm just sort of also stating like check me on what my basic understanding is. Like what is the language dynamic in Mumbai between like I guess Marathi, Hindi, and English, and if there are like other ones too.
Right, right. So, I mean, yeah, India, again, so diverse. We have, 28 states and 8 union territories. Every state kind of has its own language. And then within these states and within these languages, you will have so many different dialects based on, where in the state you're, present and placed. So sometimes it's hard for people to communicate, even though they're speaking the same language, but their dialects are so different. And I wouldn't say hard to communicate, but it's just a very different dialect. And so there's so many permutations and combinations and just so many languages spoken. And I guess to like honor that diversity, the official languages in our country are English and Hindi, and everything else is kind of not an official. So like all paperwork and everything is allowed to be in English and Hindi. But of course, there's provisions for it to be in other languages as well, as and when the need arises. But yeah, in terms of language, everyone like in Bombay pretty much understands Hindi. You have an interesting combination of Hindi and English called Hinglish, which again is very colloquial, and you would just speak it every day without even thinking. And so that is something that again pretty much everyone speaks in Maharashtra, and of course in Mumbai, a lot of people do speak Marathi, but it's not a requirement. Like you could survive completely okay without knowing Marathi. Like you'll have when you go into stores and everything, like even if it's like a Zara or an H&M, which are very international brands, you'll have their boards, of course, written in English in like large font, but then at the bottom you'll see it in Marathi or Hindi or sometimes both. And so, that's pretty much how it works. Same with like signboards and everything. They're mostly in English, but they also have like Hindi and Marathi written on them. So it's very easy for anyone who comes from abroad to navigate. Even people who move from like within the country, when they come to India and if they don't know Marathi, super easy to navigate. Um, yeah, not a problem at all, actually.
Yeah. So I figured for a city this big, you're gonna have a certain element of English and Hindi are kind of the ones that everyone at least will understand one of those two, probably. But is Marathi something where that's more of a like people who are like the quote the locals, the people who have grown up around there and the people who are from the immediate area, that's going to be their default language between themselves, and then Hindi would be like a thing you learn after you Marathi is your native language, and then you'll learn Hindi to talk to everyone else in Mumbai, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so in schools, you have a lot of schools that are Marathi medium schools, and then you have English medium schools where, the primary language is English, and you'll have Marathi as a subject in school. But I would say Hindi is given more importance again because it kind of gives you access to the country at large, versus Marathi kind of restricts you to the state of Maharashtra. But yeah, I had Marathi in school as a language, I think, from the fifth grade until maybe the seventh grade, so just like a few years. Some schools even allow you to take French instead of Marathi, but which is interesting. But yeah, you end up learning it, because the cops speak Marathi, and it's just everywhere you go, like you will hear people speak it. If you go to the local like vegetable and fish markets, and of course people do speak Hindi, some of them even speak very good English, but you'll hear them communicate at least with each other in Marathi. And again, people who prefer to speak Marathi will converse in Marathi. But yeah, it's English and Hindi official languages. No one will ever feel lost or out of place if they know just English or Hindi.
I'm sure I'm gonna keep coming back to so many New York analogies because it just seems like there's so much that are like that's similar between the
Yeah.
two cities
I
as you
felt
describe it.
absolutely. I felt so at home when I lived in New York. I moved there for work after I graduated with my master's in marketing, and I lived there, and I felt so much at home. It was so nice to see so many people everywhere because I'm just so used to that in Bombay, and so that everyone's like, oh, Times Square, the crowd, and it never bothered me because like where I come from, we are like very populated. But yeah, I mean, the way you're describing, I mean, yeah, it's just New York and Mumbai are very, very, very similar in terms of even like the culture, in terms of like it's a city that never sleeps and, located near the water, and, tiny in terms of geography, but just so dense. And
Yeah.
yeah, just very cosmopolitan.
To that point, actually, about sort of culture and cultural norms, what does the sort of the social life, social behavior, kind of how people behave, play out? You mentioned there's very much that focus on like the constant working, people are hustling to kind of make it, not at all like an agricultural place. Um, is the culture what we'd think of when we think of like a very big bustling city?
Yeah, absolutely. There's like bars and restaurants, and like obviously nightlife is huge. Um, we used to have like bars open until 3 a.m., but then because of the change in government, I think they now are officially open to like 1:30. And I think maybe earlier it wasn't even 3 a.m. It was much later. But yeah, now it's a bit early, but you'll have people like going to each other's houses after, and yeah, it's like any other like big metropolitan city, cosmopolitan city, I guess. um, Movies are a huge part of our culture. Again, the cinemas are always full, and that's something that people really look forward to. um, and I mean, weddings are a huge part, again, because we're such a large population. There's always somebody getting married, and so there's always like that kind of celebration. And again, like we mostly live in like large families, traditionally, and so you always have like there's always something going on, like it's somebody's birthday, or it's somebody's like anniversary, or like some sort of celebration, or it's a wedding. And we also have so many festivals, that we celebrate, and so there's literally always something going on, like regardless of your socioeconomic, there's always something to celebrate. But yeah, for like people like us who enjoy and can afford to party, that's definitely available to whoever can enjoy it. And it's like world class. We have some really good chefs and who've opened restaurants, and mixologists and all of that. So it's really on par with like any other international city.
I'm curious about you mentioned event like holidays and those sorts of things. What are some of the big holidays that people are going to celebrate? Again, not everyone's going to do every single one, right? But like, what are the ones where it becomes a major event in the city and you can kind of feel the energy around you for certain holidays?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have so many, and they're all kind of rooted in religious festivals. But you have the spirit of like everyone kind of celebrating in a sense. And so you have like Diwali is definitely huge, where you'll see it's kind of like how Christmas is in the US, like it's
Yeah.
pretty big.
For people who aren't familiar with Diwali, what is Diwali?
So Diwali is a Hindu festival primarily, and it's the festival of lights. And so it's basically according to the Hindu mythology and folklore, and all of that, and just the faith. It's the triumph of like good over evil, and so it's a 5 day kind of back to back event. And it's based on the lunar calendar because that's how the Hindu calendar operates. So there's like not a fixed date. Every year it's different depending on the phases of the moon, and that's true for like all of the at the Hindu festivals at least, and even the Muslim ones also. And so, yeah, Diwali is just basically, there's firecrackers and people buy new clothes and they send each other gifts and, they host people over, at their houses. And nobody works. You take like at least 5 days off of work. Schools are closed, colleges are closed. Um, and so, yeah, it's just a time to like reconnect with your family and, friends and people play cards a lot. So it's interesting. And it's again towards the end of the year. It's usually around October or November. So it's like you're celebrating the success of the year up until now. It's also the festival of wealth, and so you honor like the energy of wealth and really celebrate what that means, like what really is abundance, in the spiritual sense as well as in the material sense. So that's really big. Eid is also like one of the big festivals, which is primarily a Muslim festival. But of course, the Hindu population is the majority. But Eid is huge again. The banks are closed. You have holidays and time off from work, and it's the same concept. Like people, families cook together and they celebrate just being together. And then of course you have Christmas, where especially in Bombay, like all of the it's lit up really nicely. I guess they just don't take off the lights from Diwali, but Christmas is really nice. It's you know
They just use like we'll just keep the same lights, just use it for Christmas a couple months later.
Yeah, just keep the lights
Yeah.
on. And so yeah, Christmas is lovely. You have like Christmas markets, not in the traditional like European sense at all, but it's really lovely actually. And the weather's nice, and yeah.
I'm curious to just do a little follow up on Christmas. Actually, is that because I do know that it's not huge in India, but it's like 2.5% of the population is Christian, like identifies as Christian. Is that because of a Christian population in the city, or is it more of the way I've kind of heard Christmas is in East Asia? It's sort of a global, almost secular type holiday where it's like really it's a Western import. It's not as religious as in certain Western countries.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And I think it has to do again with the commodification of holidays in a way for like corporations to
Yeah.
sell things, and that's just how it functions. So yes, like every mall and every store will have a Christmas tree. Every restaurant will have a Christmas menu. So it's most definitely also it's the end of the year. People celebrate, and again, kids believe in Santa again because we've seen Santa in like Hollywood movies and in in cartoons. And so yeah, it's most definitely an import. But also yeah, it for like a certain part of the population, it is the biggest festival based on their religion and faith. And so yeah, it's interesting to see that mix. But most definitely, like you'll see every brand trying to insert some sort of like holiday offer and just make the most of the occasion.
So interesting seeing Christmas, how it's become this again, sort of like non-religious global phenomenon that's just almost kind of everywhere. And again, I've never been to Japan, but my sense is they just like commodify the hell out of it, and they're just like not religious at all. There's a whole like they eat KFC, and there was a whole marketing tie-in in the '70s, and it's funny stuff. But actually, I want to back up a little bit when you were talking about family dynamics and there being traditionally big families in Mumbai, and see if maybe this is actually maybe a point of difference between New York and Mumbai, which is certainly in recent decades. I would say there's a general stereotype rate of cost of living is such that you don't tend to think of big families or really strong family dynamics when you think of like Manhattan, or at least I generally don't. Maybe outer boroughs, but even then it's even iffy in some cases. There's sort of almost this trade-off of like big families equals like not Manhattan, and Manhattan is a lot of single people, a lot of people, maybe they're dating or they're, married, but it's no kids, much smaller and atomized lives. Is that true in some ways in Mumbai, or is there like, no, there are some fundamental differences just in the way like families and like the way families are kind of set up in a way?
I think there's a mix of both. And traditionally, we've had families, this idea of like joint families where the parents and their children and their families live pretty much together in the same unit, or, um, maybe like if it's an apartment building, they'll live on one floor and they'll have them like family on a different floor, but the idea is to stick really as close together as possible. But of course, because of the economic boom that Mumbai went through in the early 90s, which continues until today, you have this idea of like a lot of people moving in from different parts of the city and different parts of the country. And so they don't, they stay away from their parents in that sense. So it's a mix of both. It's just like a juxtaposition of two different kind of eras or cultures, or just two different time periods in a way, if that makes sense. So you definitely have both, but yeah, and you will see so many single people in Bombay again because they move for work and they live kind of, in that way. Also, nowadays, all of the families, like the idea of joint families, we're kind of moving away from that, and families are becoming more nucleated, and it's kind of like a single family lives in one apartment, and that has become the norm. But like I think earlier, even like 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't very common. Like you would very much live with your parents, and when you got married, you would live with, your family and parents in the same kind of area, or the
Yeah.
same unit.
How? Yeah. So it's a period of change, a period of transition in habits. How does that affect things like dating or social life with your friends if you're, let's say, on the younger side? Is there, again, there's like a range. Some people are going to be more traditional. Some people are going to be very kind of like modern progressive. And is there also, again, like sort of a state of change right now in something like dating, let's say?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a state of change. I mean, it really depends on how comfortable you are with your family and how kind of approving they are. But like the idea of dating is pretty much like not very, it's a very Western concept in a way, which, not to say that like people my parents' age didn't date back in the day. Like, of course they did. I think as humans, like there's just some things that stay the same. But I think it was not as socially like accepted, as much as it is now. So like that's definitely changing. And I think the apps have really like evened out the playing field like all over the world, because we
Mm.
have all of the apps
Yeah.
that you guys have. Like we have Raya, Bumble,
Mm.
Tinder, like you name it. They're all,
What's Raya? I've never heard of Raya before.
oh, it's a dating app for people in the entertainment industry, primarily.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so like a lot of
Interesting.
the Hollywood celebrities like are, on it, and people all over the world, I guess. It's more of like a celebrity dating app is what it's viewed as.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
earlier to join, like you needed to have a very large Instagram following because it's like if you're
You need an Instagram. 50,000 minimum buy-in or something. 100,000 minimum buy-in.
no, but that has changed. Apparently, it's more
Whatever.
accessible now. um,
Okay. It's
but
funny.
but yeah, you have like
Oh
all of these
man.
again because India is just such a large market,
Yeah.
and it's pretty much a part of the culture now.
And in terms of how things are changing with gender norms, because, and I get, obviously, talk about this as much as you want, and I get it can be, a very sensitive subject. My understanding is that Mumbai is, relatively speaking, a very progressive place compared to kind of the rest of India, maybe minus a couple other cities. That's true in terms of things like women's rights and dating and like living there.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, like just to piggyback off of that a little, like Bombay is one of the safest cities for women. There's just, you don't have to think twice, like as a single woman, if I'm walking down the street in like, really late at night, it's not an issue. Like I could take public transportation and I will feel very safe. And that's not true for a lot of cities, especially like a city like Delhi. Even after like 5 p.m., I would not be allowed and I wouldn't even feel comfortable stepping out of the house. And so that's just, yeah, one thing I wanted to flag about Mumbai. It's very safe for everyone at all periods of time. But sorry, coming back to your point, yeah, I think Bombay is more progressive than other cities for sure. But again, we're governed by like the economic, just the laws that govern the entire country, and it's not quite as we're not where we should be. Honestly, we're still fighting for a lot of the stuff that, again, there's a very privileged part of the society that is very liberal and very, progressive and see and just empathetic and believes that everyone should have equal rights. But unfortunately, that's not always implemented in terms of just the way things are in the country. And it is very unfortunate, and there's a lot of stigma still, I will say. uh, it's We tend to be a very judgmental people sometimes. Um, so yeah.
Is this stigma that people in Mumbai have about people outside, or is this a stigma that people outside of Mumbai have about people in Mumbai, or both?
I think it's both. I think we're just very, as a population, we're so diverse, but I think that also divides us in a way, wherein we're very like casteist. I know it sounds very harsh, but you kind of have a lot of castes still opposing marriage if somebody wants to marry someone outside of their caste or religion or faith. So a lot of that happens. I think people are very protective, and this like us versus them dynamic is very much, um, it's very much alive, and it's not so much like by city, but it's more, I think, by religion, by faith, by caste. Yeah.
To that point, actually, of Mumbai compared to other parts of India, I want to get back to not exactly Marathi, the language, but the region of Maharashtra. How does Mumbai sort of factor into this province? Is it one of these elements where there's the city and then there's kind of land outside, and a lot of people in the city don't really care? They're like, okay, we are just the city. We don't really care about what's out there. Or is there more of a sense of the region of Maharashtra does factor in a fair amount to Mumbai as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the spirit of Maharashtra bleeds into the city in terms of like the food. There's obviously that huge influence there in terms of the language. Again, even if you don't speak it, you will hear it everywhere. You have Marathi movies and Marathi cinemas, which you'll see even in Bombay. And yeah, just a huge population, a huge part of the population that still speaks Marathi. Again, you have Marathi schools based in the city of Bombay. So you're definitely aware that you're part of Maharashtra, as a state, as a city. But in terms of, I think people in Bombay just tend to be so focused on, their lives and their work that I guess there's not much time to really think about anything else. Pune is like a city close by. It's one of the other large ones in Maharashtra that is very urban. A lot of tech is based out of there. And so, I mean, yeah, I guess you're aware that you're part of this larger state when you travel outside of the state. Like you go to Pune, or you go to like the hills for the weekend, or like you travel basically outside of the city. But yeah, I mean, otherwise it's just you are Maharashtra, and you are definitely, there's a lot of agriculture in Maharashtra, which is huge. So you'll have like a lot of fields and a lot of just a lot of agriculture. Again, close to Bombay, where all our produce like comes from the fringes. So yeah, I mean, you are definitely part of the larger spirit and culture of it. But again, like if you live in Mumbai, you are very privileged, and again, not everyone is privileged, obviously, because like, there's so much diversity even there. But yeah, you have this awareness that you're in one of the best cities in the country.
It's interesting that go back to the America analogy. The reason I ask that is because my personal sense is, again, it sounds like Mumbai is very similar to New York in this way, in that pretty much it's just the city. And outside of that, it's like, yeah, there's maybe the immediate zone. Like, yes, if you're in New York City, there's like, the immediate outlying counties where you have the suburbs. That does, yes, factor into people's sense of awareness. But the way the borders are is even you get a couple hours outside, unless someone's commuting in, there's very little sense of connection to like the rest of that state, New York. or even like parts of New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Vermont and that region versus not having ever lived in Texas or not having grown up in California. My sense is comparatively, let's say California and Texas, there's more of a sense of you're in that state as a whole, even if you're in Dallas or Houston or Los Angeles or San Francisco, where the outlying land does factor in a lot more to like your sense of place. And it's not like we are this city, and if you're not in the city, like you're not one of us. Whereas New York, I feel like there's a much stronger feeling of that tied to that city in particular, which just it sounds like that is the case for Mumbai. It's less like it's a city in Maharashtra. It's just we got Mumbai, and then there's like not our city.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just such a self-sufficient little, cluster of islands that, yeah, you don't really need to look beyond for anything, really. I mean, not to say, again, all our agriculture comes from outside. And
Sure.
obviously,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
respect for that interdependence. But I think on like a personal day-to-day level, yeah, you don't really, think of that much at all. Actually, again, it's very much like just do your work, party on the weekend. That's pretty much the hustle that
The
Mumbai
hustle, yeah.
has embodied in a way.
Nice. You've mentioned produce, you mentioned food, you mentioned agriculture. I always want to talk about food. I think different kinds of food from different parts of the world and different kinds of food within certain countries, I think is we don't talk about enough. So I'd love to get a sense of food in Mumbai. We can talk about international, but I'm also curious about like traditionally local food or food from that region. So what I was thinking about doing is starting it off as as an American about like a typical American sense of like Indian food and these dishes, and then compare that to like what would actually be the case in Mumbai, right? So going in here as an average American Joe, right? Indian food, the association is going to be you're going to have things like naan bread, you're going to have rice, you're going to have things like chicken korma and lam sag and lots of like bits of meat that are in these kind of flavorful curry type stews that you eat with bread and rice. It's going to be a lot of like chicken, a lot of lamb, a lot of vegetables. And those are good, and and then you'll have like little fried things. You'll be like a little like a samosa and something, a little fried kind of thing. And that's, I mean, unless someone gets very adventurous, the stereotype is that'll be the core thing of what most people, let's say in the U.S., generalizing here, would associate with like Indian food, right? Which is true in places, right? But that's not true of the whole country. So what would things look like in Mumbai? Like, might there be some similarities to that, but also are there like major differences? Like that's not at all what we do in Mumbai.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Food is just, again, because we're such a diverse country, every region has their own influence on food. And yes, like you hear of naan bread and chicken tikka masala and all of those things. And that just represents such a small, part of where that food, that's essentially North Indian food. And you've probably heard of dosa, which is, South Indian. Dosa and idli, that's traditionally South Indian food.
Dosa are they're like very thin. I wouldn't call them crepes. They're not crepes, but or pancakes. But they're very thin, round pieces of like, they're made from like what is it, lentil and rice?
Yeah, lentil.
It's like mixed together.
Correct. It's mostly
Yeah.
rice flour and lentil. And
Right, okay.
It's served with sambar and chutney. Chutney is made of usually coconut, and the sambar is like
Yeah.
again a mix of amazing vegetables and masalas and spices and all of that. And it's it's a gravy, like it's a wet dish. But yeah, I mean, dosa is essentially a crepe. It's a very thin, crispy. It's yummy. So yeah, I mean, you have a lot of that South Indian cuisine, and again, that's just the tip of the iceberg of South Indian cuisine. And then you have North Indian food, which is again like your roti, your naan, your chicken tikka masala, your saag paneer, and all of those dishes. But then you have food that's like traditionally very Bombay, and I think the street food here is very popular again because it's the city that never sleeps, it's always on the go. So you have people like outside railway stations who will just pick up this food, from the street. Like there's literally no time to to waste on food or like an actual meal. So you have vada pav, which is like super popular in Mumbai. It's basically a pav bread, which is like a burger bread in a way, but it's really not. And inside is like a fried ball of potato mixed with masalas. And it's really yummy. I'm not doing justice to what it actually might be, but it's really yummy. And then you have a lot of like chaat, which is again um, pani puri, dahi puri. Um, I don't know how to describe them, but they're basically these tiny crispy things with like a lot of chutneys, and it's really spicy and savory. And they're more like snacks that again you get on the street. There's Bombay has a very famous. It's called Bombay sandwich. It's really yummy. It's basically bread with chutney and potato and masala and cheese and vegetables, and it's so yummy. You get it outside like every college, every railway station, like every nook and corner will sell this. It's essentially street food. And then, of course, like Bombay, because it's a coastal city, you have a lot of seafood, and a lot of like coconut is used in traditional seafood in those preparations.
What is some of the seafood like? Because that's again going back to the Western generalization of Indian food, right? My understanding is that's very much that sort of northern inland, Upper Ganges, River Valley area. And I mean, again, as a Westerner, right? I never associated seafood with Indian cuisine as you'd find it at like a typical takeout place, or even a typical sit down restaurant, of which there are more now. But even like a nice sit down restaurant, I don't tend to think of there being a lot of seafood that the Americans are ordering. But right, you said Bombay's a coastal city, so like what do those dishes look like?
I mean, you have a bunch of like fish, like pomfret. I know is very common. Um, I think it's called Bombay duck also, which essentially is fish.
It,
Um, so you have a
Wait,
bunch.
so Bombay duck is a type of fish?
Yeah, Bombay duck is a type of fish. Um, you also
Oh.
have a lot of like shrimp, and we call it prawns here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
that's pretty popular. Like I know when you think seafood and you think Boston, like you think of like the lobster roll and like all of that. It's very
Yeah.
different here. You
Yeah.
won't see so much lobster really. People
Yeah.
cook with
Yeah.
crab, like that's really popular.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a wide, I mean, traditionally, a lot of, again, the cultures or the different kind of faiths believe in vegetarianism. Not all of them at all, but like some of them do. And so you do have like so many options for vegetarian food all over the city. Like it is never a problem to find vegetarian food. Even vegan, actually, like a lot of our food is cooked without milk or without, I mean, yogurt is a part of, usually every meal, but yeah, it's so easy to be vegan and vegetarian, especially in in India, especially in Bombay. There's also this cutting chai, which is very popular in Maharashtra, in Mumbai, especially. But it's this idea of like a tiny shot glass. Well, it's a little bigger than a shot glass, but it's like a glass about this big, and it has steaming hot tea is poured into it, and the whole thing isn't really filled, but it's very strong tea, black tea with milk in it and spices, like you have ginger or you have cardamom or like different spices. um, and I don't know why it's called cutting chai, because apparently like you're cutting the glass and you're not filling it up or something like that. There's an interesting story, which I'm not doing justice to, but yeah, it's very popular and people kind of live on that. So you have a lot of street vendors serving chai actually. Um, so your daily, like your construction workers and laborers, like they really look forward to having their cutting chai and their vada pav in the evening. And people in like large offices, like production companies, ad offices, like they will always order chaat and like maybe even chai, Bombay sandwich for like meetings or like just as an evening snack. So this idea of like snacking in the evening is pretty big. And yeah, we enjoy our street food. We call it nashta, which means breakfast actually, but it's not breakfast, it's in the evening.
I'm not like a huge tea guy, but I do, as in I don't go all out with all the different kinds, but I do really enjoy it. And that would be sort of another popular conception that I would have about India as a whole is like tea is a huge aspect to the culture, specifically in terms of it being, I don't want to say like the beverage of choice, but if I were basing this off of like stereotypes that I know very little about, I would think India is absolutely tea, not coffee so much in terms of what the focus is. But I could imagine Mumbai, maybe you would still have coffee.
Yeah, no, South, absolutely.
I mean,
Like,
obviously you have coffee. I mean like culturally, it's
yes.
you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Like South India has really good filter coffee. They call it filter coffee, which again, all of the South Asian joints like they serve it here. It's really yummy. It's like coffee with milk, and they kind of like pour it from one container to the other, so it's a bit frothy and it's steaming hot, and it's quite lovely. And yeah, you're right. Like I think traditionally we have been a very tea-based culture. Again, because we have just we grow so much of our own tea, which is just lovely, and it comes from different parts of the country. But yeah, best quality tea comes from India. Um, and so traditionally, chai is like a huge part of our culture. It's tea again with milk and with maybe ginger or like herbs and spices. So that's really celebrated. But ever since there's been like this huge coffee culture coming into the city, the youth and they pretty much, I don't think they would drink chai as much. Like I would associate that as something that my parents would drink and like people older than them would drink. But everyone else kind of like coffee is the thing to drink. Like you have coffee shops everywhere, and again from like Starbucks, and we now have a Tim Hortons, and all of these.
The Canadians are getting in on the coffee game.
They're getting in. So you
Yeah.
have all of these international. We have a Prêt à Manger. We have
Yeah.
so many, yeah, just like Costa Coffee, DeBella Coffee,
Nice.
again from like different, like, so we have these brands with like obviously multiple chains, and then we also have like more homegrown, artisan, kind of boutique coffee houses, which are really, really, really popular. And it's just so easy. I think it's just so much of a part of the culture that yeah, let's like chat over a cup of coffee, and so you have like meetings or you have friends catching up, and so that coffee culture is actually so big that I've seen like chai kind of being sidelined a little bit because of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially among like the urban, more working, and yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of different aspects of Mumbai as a city, but of course there's the topic of Bollywood, which is the industry that you work in, the preeminent film and TV industry in India. Do you want to give people who maybe have heard of Bollywood but don't know a lot beyond that sort of a basic introduction to the industry, kind of how it works, what sort of films get made? I know you mentioned it's you got a big, very diverse slate of projects, but yeah, what it's kind of like at a high level, like the industry
Yeah,
sort of as a
absolutely. I
whole.
mean, that would be hard to do again, given just the diversity of films within Bollywood. But it's very, they're very commercial, mainstream films, I will say. Traditionally, they've all been theatrical because that's pretty much what the business model was. But with the Netflix and the Amazon Primes of the world, and the Disney Hotstars of the world coming in, it's you have a lot of movies now that are made for straight to digital, that don't go into the theater, and so it's really like now there's a different kind of storytelling emerging. But traditionally, yes, theatrical was like big films, event films that your family would go with, on opening weekend, again because we're such a family oriented culture. The idea is that you take your friends, you take your family, and you go and you watch a movie in the cinema on the weekend, and that's just it's like an outing or an event or like just a celebration of our culture in a way. So yeah, that's Bollywood. It's very star driven, and actor driven. It's also, with emerging directors, it's become very auteur driven. I mean, it always has been since the beginning. But yeah, Bollywood is predominantly the mainstream Hindi language industry. Just like the rest of the country, I guess, and the rest of the world is in a state of transition and flux and just kind of trying to find its feet in a way and reinvent. I mean, it always, like every industry, kind of reinvents itself and adapts to like keep up with the time and ages, and that's certainly something that's happening right now. Because traditionally you would have movies that were predominantly romantic dramas, musicals, which would do so well in the theaters, but now it's kind of, that notion is being challenged a lot. And so I think people are just trying to figure out what it is that the people want to watch, what kind of films are working. Earlier, if you had like a big star attached to your show or to your film, you were guaranteed to get, box office success, and you could pretty much bank on that. But recently, they found that is not the case, and I think audiences are becoming more sophisticated and, just really choosing good storytelling. So it's a great time for storytellers and filmmakers, and just to, there's more room to push boundaries, there's more room to tell, character driven stories. There's just more room to even have women lead, movies. And earlier, just even like a decade ago, it would be kind of hard for a producer to put their faith in a movie that was led by a woman. But now that's, seems to be changing. And of course, we're not quite where we want to be, but it's all change in the best, in a positive direction and in the best direction. So yeah, we're in a state of flux, I will say.
To get into sort of film and TV again from sort of a Western perspective when they're thinking about India, that the assumption often is the idea of the musical, right? There's a very, very popular association of Westerners thinking about Indian films as often being just like musicals. I mean, that's probably a little bit of an extreme, but I think that's very much the popular image. How much of that is sort of just a stereotype versus how much of it is like, yeah, no, those are actually generally the films that would traditionally do the best, and it did come from a place of like,
Right. So
box office.
absolutely. So
Or box
song
office
and
returns,
dance
rather.
like seems to be a big part of the, of the appeal of a film. And so like a lot of the movies that do really well, and I would say like most of them have those elements. Even if it's like a noir or like some sort of very action oriented film, you will have a song or two at least, that, can kind of get those audiences in and just kind of become part of the culture. So like song and dance is a huge part of it. And I think it goes back, like if you go back in time, there was a time when like travel was not so accessible to like majority of the people, and it still isn't, but we have a large emerging like middle class now that can afford to travel and can afford to go out. But I think for the longest period of time, international travel was not, as popular and as accessible. And so people would like go into the cinemas and see, on the big screen, these actors and actresses in like foreign, like really fancy locations and like really picturesque and beautiful, like in the hills of Switzerland or like anywhere abroad. And so I think it was like a really nice escape. And that has continued to the day. I think, people go to the cinemas to kind of escape their mundane lives in a way. And so, yeah, we definitely do have that escapist element a little bit, which, still works even today, even though now our films are more rooted, I would say, in reality and in the present times. But you still have that element, and I think people still enjoy that. And yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to the US. It's kind of like the death of the romantic comedy or the romantic drama in a way. Um, we're not quite sure. Like, I think these films are mostly going to, straight to SVOD platforms and not doing as well theatrically. It's more, again, like Marvel seems to be doing so well internationally, and even in India, like it's more like these event, larger than life, like action kind of movies. The franchise films also in a way that are doing, that garner people to the theaters. Um, and so, yeah, I think we're in a state of definitely figuring out what it is that works. And again, like there's no formula, there's no way to do it. But I think for the longest time there was a formula, and it was like 3 hour movie, family dynamics, song, dance, love story, and like that would just work and do very well. But I think of late that notion has been challenged. Um, but it's, it's resulting in like some very good storytelling, um, based in writing, and I think it's a great time for writers in the industry because there is a demand for it. I think it's not been a very respected, job function within the industry, but I am very hopeful that that is changing. I can already see that a little bit now. Like, I think writers are getting some more respect just because there's more demand for, um, a different kind of storytelling that, hopefully brings in audiences to the theaters.
Actually, about that with writing. So before we sort of started recording this, but we were, sort of chatting in the digital green room, shall we call it? You mentioned a point about the concept of a TV writers' room, which, for those of you, listening who are not sure what a TV writers' room is, at least in the States, right? It's a room where you get the writers together and they collectively write out scripts for a television show. Right, so it's not usually going to be a single person; it's a group of people. You were mentioning that in Bollywood in Mumbai, that concept of having a room of people working together on a script is a very new concept.
Yeah, it's a very new
Is that
concept.
fair to
I
say?
think this whole idea of, series coming into India itself is very new. This basically this notion of like premium television, that streams on, again, the major global platforms. It's a very new, form, and so we don't traditionally have a legacy of like showrunners who know how to, or like have necessarily, that kind of experience to guide them forward. So it's still pretty much an industry like this. I'm talking about the series that's driven by directors in a way. So the director is like the big name attached, um, even though it is a writer's medium at the end of the day. But I feel like a lot of the directors are empowering writers to, to write the stories and develop them how they feel fit. But a lot of it, in a lot of rooms I've seen, is in conjunction with the director, right up front, which I know is so different in the US because it's like you have your showrunner and then you have your writers, and the showrunner has final call on the edit and on everything, basically, the scripts, all of it. And the directors are basically directors on hire who come, and they may not even shoot the entire series, but they'll be hired for like a couple episodes here and there. So that model isn't quite, used here. I think we're eventually gonna get there once there's like enough of that talent nurtured. I think more showrunners need to be nurtured. Like, we do have a couple who are purely, who are kind of the same, perform the same function as the showrunners in the West, in that they lead the writers' room and they have final call and everything, and they don't want to direct. But they're literally like one or two that I can names that I can think of. Everyone else, pretty much, it's the director who, helms the project in that way. Um, but yeah, the concept of writers' rooms is pretty new, and so you have some rooms that are like physical rooms that meet every day from like a certain, for a certain number of hours. But then you have a lot of rooms that don't meet every day. They'll just meet over Zoom or maybe in person, like maybe once a week, to, get on the same page, and then you go off and do your own thing. Sometimes it's like both of these in on the same project. So like you'll meet every day for like maybe the first month or 2 months, and then you'll go off and like do your own thing. But yeah, it's pretty much the writers that are on a particular project tend to have other projects as well going on. So it's more chaotic in that, there's no like formula to balancing it really. It's just take it as it comes. So that is little, I wouldn't say chaotic, it's just not very organized, in that sense. But producers are like happy to have writers work on multiple projects, which is great. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's quite different also from the US in that the roles, are very well defined. You have, you break the series as part of the room, and then you divide the episodes up. But there's, that's not necessarily how it might work here. Like, in a lot of rooms, you have just maybe one person writing all of the scripts and then somebody else doing a dialogue pass and, converting the English dialogues to Hindi, or, not writing any dialogue. I mean, yeah, it depends on how that goes, but it's just so different for each and every producer, filmmaker. And it's a very interesting and dynamic space, but it is evolving. You are seeing it get more organized, and you're seeing more value and more respect given to writers. Of course, there's still a very, very long way to go, but it is emerging as, just a new area that everyone is looking to kind of gain expertise over at the earliest.
I'm very curious. And this might sound like a really stupid question, but your point about writers' rooms makes me kind of have to ask it, which is, I don't have to, but I'm curious to ask it, which is, was TV, like the concept of scripted TV, just really not something that traditionally people cared about very much in India? Because I'm thinking that, like, even before we had prestige TV in the States, like the concept of a writer's room, I mean, it had been around for decades. People were doing that in like in the 70s and stuff, shortly after they figured out the concept of television. And so I know that sounds kind of ridiculous to ask. Like I imagine, of course, there was TV, but if the concept of a writer's room wasn't ever developed until now, like,
Right.
what did
No,
that used to
absolutely.
look
We
like?
have, we've had a thriving TV industry. Again, your, live general entertainment channels feature a lot of shows, but traditionally these have all been soap operas, at least the ones that have done well. And of course, like the genesis of it, it started with like farmers and, taking you inside their world and everything. And then, of course, we had some very good television come in. But in the recent past, like what's done really well has just been um, soap operas, like very melodramatic, soaps, which again is a very different space from the cinema that we were making. And now I feel like prestige TV just feels like a very different, or like the world of series, I will say, just feels like a completely new medium, which is so different from the television that we've had, on our channels. So it kind of is like a marriage between TV and film, in that it's more cinematic, even though it's focused on character. It allows you the time and space to really explore that character, which our cinema doesn't allow. So it feels more like an offspring of movies than it does of television, if that makes any sense. And so, yeah, you don't really have, like in TV, in film, traditionally, you have like the director collaborating with the writer to write the screenplay. And so I think that's pretty much where it's kind of continuing from. So yeah, the concept is very new. I think this idea of like multiple writers collaborating to create like one unified piece is just, it's very new. um, and I think initially, like a lot of the filmmakers just viewed series as just one long feature, but obviously that's not what it is. And we've had some amazing work come out of India in terms of series, which are, when I watched like the first big series to come out, I was like, oh my god, like this is literally international level. It's structured in the same way, and it's just beautifully made, and it just got me personally so excited about wanting to tell these kinds of stories. And obviously did the same for like so many other people. But essentially it's like a novel playing out in like 6 to 8 episodes. um, so yeah, it is traditionally different from like the television that we had, which was like an episode a week, or an episode every day actually, and which go on pretty much forever. Those were rooted more in family dynamics, and like the world and scale was much smaller. But I think with these series, just the scale is so much larger. You have a larger canvas to paint from, and again, it's very, very cinematic. And so you would associate films more to that kind of storytelling.
Were those older soap operas? Were they usually just written by like one person, or would they? I could imagine the workload would be too much for one person. They would just sort of like delegate them out, but you didn't have maybe
Yeah,
the collaboration the way
I'm
you have
not
now.
sure. I haven't really seen any of those rules in progress. Like, I know it's multiple people also in terms of that, but yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
how the dynamics of that work. Usually, I'm assuming you come and discuss the story and then you go and like write it off on your own. Um,
you go and do it just do just one episode, and that
yeah,
person takes that one, and just go do it, and then
yeah,
bring
yeah.
your
I
work
don't want
in,
to
and
speak
then
to
we'll
that
just
because
film
I'm
it.
sure,
Yeah,
I mean, it's a well-oiled machine going on for like a very, very
of
long
course.
time.
Yeah, no
But
problem.
for the people who traditionally worked in features, for them, it's like a completely new kind of baby to look after, and just a new
Yeah.
territory. So we're taking a lot of pride in like telling our local stories. And again, for global platforms, like with the Netflix and Prime and all of those platforms coming in, it is just opened out like this whole new avenue to tell stories that are very rooted and very global, but local, but appeal to a global audience. So I mean, yeah, I would urge people to watch these series out of India. I mean, the idea is actually like what we're doing here is just learning about each other's lives, or like you mostly learning about, life on this side of the planet. But yeah, we're just like having a conversation and, exchanging ideas and thoughts and perspectives. And I think that is, while the goal is entertainment, I think that's just a beautiful byproduct is the whole cultural exchange. And it's a great opportunity to kind of learn about our culture and about our people. And we're making some great stuff which is again international quality, and really holds up. So I would encourage people to like watch our stuff. That's available everywhere pretty much where you watch your own stuff. I don't want to say, I hate the word content, so I won't say content. But you can watch our film and TV. But yeah, I mean, it's a very exciting time for writers, for filmmakers, for storytellers. I think there's just a larger canvas to tell the kinds of stories we want to tell. And I think personally, like what appeals to me is like, until like growing up, I saw on cinema, like on the big screen, just very characters that were very put together. And like the ideal, in a way, like you have the ideal son or the ideal daughter or the ideal wife, and all of these roles were just like, and those films are great. And they're so close to my heart because I grew up watching them. But I think that's not the reality of like what humans really are. And so I love that we're getting to see an India that is truly representative of its people, and who are flawed individuals like anyone and everyone else in the world. And so I think that freedom is just like great for any filmmaker, storyteller. So yeah, I think we're gonna have some really exciting stuff to come out of our industry. And I think because audiences are becoming more sophisticated, and I mean, you're no longer competing with like another show, you're competing with the movies, you're competing with live sports, you're competing with like every kind of entertainment. And it's really like, how do you hold on to those few minutes of time that are so precious? um, so I think, yeah, there's like some things that are just common, between Hollywood and Bollywood in that way.
Thank you so much. Um, where can people find you if you want to talk about, social media, anything that's sort of public knowledge of, projects or
Yeah,
handles or
you
anything
can
like
find
that?
me on Instagram. I am at Yashna_24. I think that's right. So you can find me there. I also have a Twitter, which is the same, Yashna24, or maybe it's Yashna_24. I should remember this, but you'll find me. There's not too many Yashna 24s. Okay,
We'll put
perfect.
it we'll
Yeah,
put it
so
down below.
yep,
People want,
absolutely. You can find me
check
there.
it out.
I mean, yeah, I'm bound
Yeah.
by various NDAs, so not really about to, allowed to speak about my projects, but
Of
they're all
course,
really
yeah.
exciting. They're all
Yeah.
really in very different genres, I would say. But they're all lovely, I think, and hopefully they go into production soon, and then hopefully you see them maybe sometime like end of next year at the earliest. So yeah, it's gonna be a while. Our development timelines are very long here. Um, but yeah, you can find me on social
Mm.
media. If anyone has any questions, about India, always happy to answer them. Again, it's a huge responsibility to be representing, my country and answering all these questions. And I hope I haven't offended anybody.
Yeah.
And if I have, uh,
No, your country, just your city, just
oh
your
my
city.
gosh.
Only millions of people. That's
Yeah.
no pressure, no
But
pressure.
no, thank you so much for having me. It's
Under
been
under
a
1.3
real
billion.
pleasure.
Cakewalk, yeah.
And yeah, we should do this again soon.
Yasha, thank you so much for coming on the show. Everyone, yeah, if you haven't liked the video or subscribed yet, please consider doing so if you made it all the way to the end. We'll make sure to be out with other videos for you in the coming weeks and months involving testimonial stories and different interviews about people from all over the world, delving into culture in a nuanced and hopefully balanced way, given our Overton windows and relative worldviews. So, Yasha, thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. We will see you next time.